and uncle was a director of Mitchell Energy and Development Corp., the father of shale gas in the U.S. He made a windfall by issuing bonds and mining, and his share price rose 10,000 times. Yes, he is McClendon, the boss of NBA Thunder's Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant. McClendon pioneered a growth mode of shale oil and gas industry in the U.S. In fact, the risks are very high. What the hell is going on with American corporate bonds? How did it become what it is today? He was born in 1959 in Oklahoma in the south central of America. With silver hair, often wears rimless glasses. Apart from loving rock singers Brunch, Spring, and Steam, he has no other hobbies. He was gentle when he was young, harmless to people and animals. Graduated from Duke University in 1981 with a double degree in history and accounting. Of course, studying history can't help pay bills, and it's not easy to make money from studying literature. Therefore, McClendon with double degrees is mainly engaged in accounting. His family's financial conditions should be okay. He has an uncle named Robert Kerr, who served as governor and senator of Oklahoma and co-founder of energy giant Kerr-McGee. Soon after graduating from college, McClendon saw an article in the Wall Street Journal about a petroleum landman who became rich overnight and made $100 million. After reading the report, McClendon was greatly stimulated. He threw his accounting certificate into the trash can and ran to work in his uncle's oil company. When Chinese accountants see this paragraph, please don't throw away your accounting certificate in a hurry unless you also have an uncle who is a director of PetroChina. After a long time in the oil industry, McClendon met a peer named Ward, who was born in an oil family and graduated from the University of Oklahoma, majoring in petroleum land management. When he was in college, Ward had already began to follow his uncle to the oil field for an internship. He was an authentic oil man. He knew oil and gas exploitation technology like the back of his hand and was a very professional partner. In 1989, two 30-year-old boys couldn't get along in the workplace and pooled together $50,000 to start a business together and found Chesapeake Energy Corp. At the beginning, they didn't have much money. In fact, they were reselling some piecemeal land that big companies in Oklahoma didn't like. They spotted some land's potential to dig out oil and gas, then bought it, hoarded it, and then sold it to others. Later, when they had some money, they decided not to sell the land but dig for oil and gas by then to live. Ward, the partner, found industry professionals at that time, mainly researched and improved horizontal drilling, and advocated using hydraulic pressure to extract natural gas from shale formation, drilling shale formation from the side, injecting water and sand after blasting with explosives, so that the top cracked and thereout flowed the natural gas, which reduced the cost of developing shale gas. They began to concentrate on shale gas. In 1993, the 4-year-old company went public with a U.S. stock price of $1.33 and a market value of $25 million. The market was full of expectations for gas technology. In 1996, Chesapeake's share price rose to $30. The company also recorded a large write-down that year because the production of one of its gas fields, Austin Chalk, was lower than expected. The stock price fell below $10. In 1998, they planned to sell the company, but they couldn't find the scapegoat, so they had to continue to bite the bullet. After entering 2000, the market wind direction was changing. Everyone thought shale gas was a new investment opportunity, and hot money rolled in. By 2006, the Chesapeake Company had spent $6 billion on drilling rights to 44,550 square kilometers of land in more than a dozen states. McClendon made a fortune by mining while issuing bonds. He hired thousands of people to run around the U.S. to find out which sites might be dug up for natural gas and oil, set up a huge database, and bought drilling rights before competitors could be sure whether the land had natural gas or not. At that time, the cost of drilling a natural gas well was generally $10 million. In order to seize the market, enlarge the company data, attract more investment and push up the stock price, McClendon went crazy in mining in the U.S., because the price of natural gas had been rising, and some people had been willing to buy their bonds, so they did not think about cost and consequences at all. The enclosure movement did not end until 2007, when McClendon began to focus on mining rather than enclosure. Debt had since swelled wildly from $1 billion to $13 billion in 2010, more than the combined net debt of ExxonMobil and Chevron. During the financial crisis in 2008, natural gas prices soared to $14 per million BTU from nearly $4 2 years ago, and shale gas production had increased fivefold, while costs had dropped by 70%. When people looked at it, this company had hoarded so much land and had technology, which would definitely be amazing in the future. It can create at least 100,000 jobs, and there was a lot of praise in the market. In June 2008, Chesapeake's share price rose to $14,000 a share, which was 10,000 times higher than the share price when it started its business, and its market value reached a peak of $37.5 billion. McClendon ranked the 134th among the rich in the U.S. At that time, McClendon was so happy that he bought houses in Bermuda, Hawaii, Colorado, and Minnesota, 16 antique ships worth $9 million, and also bought part of the shares of NBA's Seattle Supersonics in 2008. In order to watch the game, together with several other Oklahoma City shareholders, he moved the Supersonics to his hometown, also known as Oklahoma City Thunder. Yes, he is the boss of NBA Thunder's Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant. At its peak, the team reached the NBA Finals in 2012, and finally lost to the Miami Heat led by James and Wade. McClendon's salary in 2008 reached an astonishing $112 million, of which $75 million was paid in bonuses alone. Bloomberg later called McClendon the father of shale gas. Chesapeake Energy, which he founded, ranked the 373rd in Fortune 500 in May 2020, had more than 10,000 employees and annual turnover reached $8.5 billion. The following sentence is very important. McClendon pioneered a growth mode of shale oil and gas industry in the U.S. That is, when everyone thought that natural gas or oil would increase in price, he desperately hoarded land, issued stocks or corporate bonds to the market to raise funds, and then slowly exploited it after hoarding land, making the company bigger first and making money later. It seemed to be nothing wrong with this model, but in fact the risks were very high. Business operations only focused on growing rapidly and pushing up stock prices, while in fact it had not much cash on hand and its ability to resist risks was very low. In the second half of 2008, when the financial crisis broke out, Chesapeake could no longer raise funds at a low price, and its share price plummeted from $14,000 to $3,000 in 2009. In order to save the market, McClendon bought his own company stock in large quantities, but it didn't help at all. In this stock price collapse, McClendon lost $2.2 billion in one lump sum. In the winter of 2012, Chesapeake's living environment became more and more difficult. McClendon planned to gamble and close the hedging position locked in high natural gas prices. As a result, it was a warm winter, natural gas prices plummeted, and McClendon suffered another fiasco. The following year, investors told McClendon to fuck off. The major shareholder Carl Icahn asked for a change in the board of directors and hired Doug Glauber to take charge of the company. McClendon had to leave the position of chairman of Chesapeake on April 1, 2013. The next day after he left, McClendon started a new company, hired 600 employees, raised $10 billion by issuing stocks and bonds, and started a new drilling business again. KKR First Reserve, Energy and Mineral Group didn't give up, and gave him huge financial support. But McClendon's good fortune in his life ran out. He was first charged with a fine by the Michigan State Attorney's Office on suspicion of commercial conspiracy. Because of the fall in oil prices in 2014, he was then removed from his CEO position at American Energy Utica, another Ohio energy company. In February 2015, McClendon's former employer, Chesapeake, took him to court, saying that he had taken the company map to another company and demanded hundreds of millions of dollars in compensation. Because of the lawsuit, the new company also dismissed him from all positions. McClendon became more and more depressed. On February 17, 2016, he wanted to go to his team Thunder to watch a game for fun. As a result, he sat in the front row and witnessed Curry of Golden State Warriors kill Thunder with a three-pointer in overtime. The Oklahoma man said McClendon stood up with a bitter face, his hands hanging down on his sides, and left silently through the private passage through the back door. 3 days later, McClendon received an indictment for conspiring to illegally bid for a crude oil and gas lease in northwest Oklahoma, and he was desperate. At 9:12 the next morning, Driving his 2013 Chevrolet Tahoe SUV, he crashed into the concrete wall under a bridge at a speed of more than 80 kilometers on a deserted path. The car was immediately engulfed by the fire, leaving only one frame. But 56-year-old McClendon should have died at the moment of impact. Later, the traffic police handling the accident said that McClendon did not wear a seat belt at all, and had every chance to avoid the concrete wall at that time, probably committing suicide. Not long after McClendon's death, Durant also left Thunder and moved to Golden State Warriors, where he won 2 championships and 2 FMVPs. And McClendon left Chesapeake Company behind with to bigger trouble. The company began to transform from shale gas to shale oil around 2013, but in order to find out the technology to reduce the cost of shale oil production, it has to do experiments in new mines. Only the production cost of shale oil in the U.S., according to the estimation of Haitong Petrochemical, has been maintained at about $40 to $50 per barrel, while the production cost in the Middle East is about $10 to $15 per barrel. There are still bigger disasters coming in 2020. COVID-19 pandemic suddenly came, global economic activities decreased, and Saudi Arabia and Russia started a price war with tacit understanding. The price of crude oil once exceeded $20 a barrel, and it was only about $40 to $45 a barrel at the time of press release today. Chesapeake Company adopted the mode of issuing bonds on a large scale to expand. When it issued bonds, it had to pay back the money. Now that the oil price is so low, it is only a barrel of oil. How can it afford to pay back the debt if it loses a barrel of oil? After McClendon, Lawler, who took over his job, could only try his best to sell the company's assets and reduce operating costs, which could not change the overall situation of the industry at all. On June 28, 2010, 4 years after McClendon's death, Chesapeake formally filed for bankruptcy because it was difficult to repay its $9 billion debt. At the time of bankruptcy, the company's total market value was only $116 million. I write 3,000 words here telling the story of McClendon and Chesapeake Company, not to introduce the history of shale oil development in the U.S., but to introduce the ins and outs of American corporate bonds, so that everyone can understand how American corporate bonds became what they are today. Only by listening to how Chesapeake grew and went bankrupt can you understand what I'm going to talk about American corporate bonds in next videos.